What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Popcast. I am DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, of course, is titled The Best of Disney. This year in 2023, it is the 100th anniversary of Disney. I mean, there's so many great classic films and television series from Disney. And originally with this podcast, we were going to do just Nightmare Before Christmas as its own thing, but we thought it's Disney's 100th anniversary, and we're not sure when some of these films that we're going to be mentioning today will get their own podcast. So we might as well just throw a bunch of Disney films all together and talk about that. And it will be specifically just Disney movies itself in this podcast. We're not going to talk about Pixar, considering we already did a Pixar podcast last year, I believe it was. And then earlier this year, we also did a two-part Marvel podcast. So we won't be talking about that. And we've done a couple of Star Wars podcasts already, with another one happening next year. So there's no point of talking about all of those franchises, just Disney itself, which I have mentioned in the past that I'm more of a Pixar guy rather than Disney, but there are some banger Disney films, especially we will talk about a lot of them on this podcast. MD, what are your overall thoughts of Disney? And I don't remember on the Pixar pod if you had mentioned, are you more of a Pixar guy than a Disney guy?
That's a tough one because they are kind of different. I guess you could say Pixar is amazing. Obviously, some of my favorite movies are Pixar movies, but Disney itself is amazing. The one word you can use, which makes sense, is magic or magical. Unbelievable. Going to Disney like Land or Disney World, an amazing experience for the most part. And the movies are great. I mean, it's been 100 years that they've been doing movies, so they've pretty much got it down. Some people would say that they do like the classic movies better, or some people might like some of the newer stuff, let's say like 90s or later up to today. But yeah, Disney is just unbelievable. I don't think you can really go wrong with watching Disney. It's for everybody. They're usually funny. They're usually a great story. Yeah, let's talk about some of these movies.
So how we're going to be doing this is that we have divided these basically by the decades. So the first one will actually be 2 decades. It's the 30s and the 40s, since there wasn't really much to go through, especially a lot of the ones we are going to be talking about have Funko Pops. So if we want to talk about some Funko Pops we could think of off the cuff, then we can as terms to these. And we're going to go basically each decade all the way until, well, this current decade as we're doing this, obviously, which is the 2020s. So let's kick off with the 1930s and the 1940s as terms to Disney. There's only 4 films listed down, but I'm sure that there's a decent amount to talk about within these 4 films. Those films being Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. I guess I'll mention Pinocchio. I mean, it's such a classic story, and there are a decent amount of cool Funko Pops, including even some Jiminy Cricket ones. Fantasia, of course, with the Sorcerer Mickey. There's lots of Sorcerer Mickey Pops.
Yeah, definitely some great films here. Fantasia, I really enjoy a lot. Pinocchio is like a timeless classic. It's been done many times, obviously, with the original. Then you have the, I want to say 2002, maybe 2003 rendition that was done. And then the newer live action Pinocchio, which is great as well. So yeah, Pinocchio, really great movie. Bambi as well. Of course, we have Pops for Bambi. I do think that there probably could be more with like some of the other characters, but we have seen a few Bambi Pops, and then Dumbo as well. The Pops are really cool for Dumbo too. Of course, when you have these 4 classic movies, they're all going to be great.
So now we're going to move over to the next decade. It's the 1950s, which I know that a lot of these movies do have Funko Pops, of course, that being Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, and Sleeping Beauty. First off, Cinderella, I mean, there's so many Cinderella Pops, of course, so there isn't really one I could think of off the top of my head specifically. Alice in Wonderland, they have been doing a lot of Alice, because I believe Alice in Wonderland just celebrated their like 80th, 90th anniversary, something like that. There was some cool Pops there, including the black light ones. Of course, there was like Caterpillar, and then there was obviously that controversy with like it not having the hookah. Peter Pan, that's also another movie that just got a decent amount of Pops, especially because of the new Netflix series. So that's pretty decent. And then Lady and the Tramp, there was the 2-pack, of course, of the 2 dogs whose names for some reason I can't remember. And then Sleeping Beauty, I for some reason cannot remember about a Sleeping Beauty pop. But nonetheless, I mean, I think Alice in Wonderland, out of all these movies, has had a pretty nice lineup of Funko Pops.
Yeah, again, here are some classic movies. Alice in Wonderland is an amazing movie. And again, a movie that has been redone a couple of times, rightfully so. I mean, what a great movie. There are some really great pops for Alice in Wonderland as well. I do own five, I believe it is, of the blacklight pops for Alice in Wonderland. Those pops are really great. Cinderella, the first Disney princess, I guess, really cool too. Of course, there is a ton of different Cinderella pops. And then Sleeping Beauty, I believe there's a decent amount of Sleeping Beauty pops. There are, of course, with the Disney princess line with the pink dress, and then obviously there's probably those gold dress ones. And then what else did we have there? Lady and the Tramp. What a classic movie that is. Of course, I feel like most people know about the kiss scene with the strand of spaghetti. And then Peter Pan, one of my favorites. An amazing movie, and again, just getting redone. Peter Pan's awesome. The characters that are in Peter Pan are so cool as well, and that's why you can have so many different pops, and there are a ton of different Peter Pan pops. I would say probably more Tinkerbells than there are of actual Peter Pan, but then the different ones for like Captain Hook, of course we've seen the Smee with Skull Rock recently at New York Comic Con last year, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was that.
Yeah, that's a great pop as well from an amazing movie. Definitely one of my favorite Disney movies.
All right, so moving over to the 1960s, there's actually a decent amount. I think the same amount as the 50s, which I also should have mentioned to you, MD, is that if there's any movies that I didn't list off that you could think of that are from the decades, you can definitely mention them. I'm sure there's going to be quite a bit of comments in the comment section below on movies that we are going to miss. But of course, it's 100 years of Disney. You're not going to go through every single Disney film. But as terms of the 1960s that are listed down, of course, we have 101 Dalmatians, The Sword and the Stone, Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, and then actually a movie that does not have Funko Pops, but the original rendition came out in the 60s, but they did make one in the 90s. But I thought this would be a perfect time to actually mention it, because when we get to the 90s, I think there's too many to talk about where it's probably gonna get lost in the shuffle. And I put down The Parent Trap. 101 Dalmatians, I mean, of course, that's a classic story. There's been quite a bit of pops, whether it's the Dalmatians itself or, of course, a couple different versions of Cruella de Vil. I mean, that OG one is going right up there in price. There is the rides that they did as a Hot Topic exclusive. The Sword and the Stone only has one pop, I believe. Or no, there's actually a wave now, as I remember. I forgot that they did a wave. Arthur pulling Excalibur. That's actually a movie I have not seen, and I was meaning to actually go watch it, because there is a movie we're going to be talking about when we get to the 80s section of this podcast that I actually watched the other night for the first time on Disney Plus in preparation. So I wish I would have had time to watch Sword and the Stone, because it seems like a pretty decent movie. Jungle Book, I know that a lot of the OG Disney pops are from the Jungle Book, and they're quite pricey. And then The Parent Trap. So for those that might not know about The Parent Trap, of course, that is the movie, at least I'm just kind of basing off of the 90s version that I seen, but basically two parents, they separate, and then like years and years later, their kids like meet up at a camp where one's raised in a different lifestyle compared to the other one, and then like at some point they try to get the parents back together. So it's a cool movie of like twins meeting up for the first time and not knowing each other previously.
Now, I'm confused because I do remember Parent Trap now, but I was thinking that the 90s Parent Trap, that's not the Sinbad movie. What movie am I thinking that has Sinbad in it?
Jingle All the Way?
No, not Jingle All the Way. There's another Sinbad movie. Let us know in the comments what I'm thinking about. Definitely a 90s movie, must be. Anyways, going back to it, Jungle Book, unbelievable. Jungle Book is a great movie. That one did get a live action remake as well. Mowgli is a really cool character. So 101 Dalmatians, yeah, another great one. And we have seen a bunch of different 101 Dalmatians things, whether it is like the animated cartoon or the 90s one or the 60s one as well. Amazing story. I love the 101 Dalmatians. I have a collection of figures, but I don't actually have any pops. So that might be something to look into. Of course, The Sword and the Stone. I have seen The Sword and the Stone one time and I was pretty young. So that is one that I will also have to watch again because it's just been so long. But yeah, there are some pretty cool pops for The Sword and the Stone. I forget what Madam something was the character that had the chase, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's like Madam Mim, I think it's
called. That's what it was. Yes, definitely. That was a pretty cool pop, especially when it comes to the chase. Mary Poppins, yeah, there's definitely a bunch of Mary Poppins pops. I believe I do have one somewhere in my collection.
All right, so moving on to the 1970s. Once again, there's a decent amount. So through this list for the 70s, we got the Aristocats, Robin Hood, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So this will expand onto Winnie the Pooh, Pete's Dragon, Schoolhouse Rock, which we just talked about recently for Funko Pops, and then the Herbie series. First off, Aristocats. I actually don't even think I've ever seen Aristocats. I know I think you have, so you'll be able to talk about that. Robin Hood, I know there's quite a few pops for that. Winnie the Pooh has so many Funko Pops, and actually recently, Winnie the Pooh, I believe, actually became a public domain. So it technically isn't even like a Disney property anymore, but for the longest time, it was a Disney property, especially like nowadays, the horror movie that came out, and now they're planning on doing a Tigger one because I think the domain is coming up soon for that, and I think Disney's letting go of that. Pete's Dragon, I think I seen the old one. I don't think I seen the live action one. That's kind of a reoccurring thing that we're seeing a lot of live action ones. Schoolhouse Rock is going to be more of your thing to talk about, but the Herbie series, oh, I grew up watching Herbie, whether it's Herbie Goes Bananas, which I think actually now as I think about that specific one was in the 80s, but like Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, a couple of the other ones were the 70s. And then, of course, in like 2005, there was the Herbie Fully Loaded, but it wasn't as good as the older movies. But still, Herbie, such a classic set of movies, and one of my favorites definitely growing up.
Yeah, so I have seen the Aristocats, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe with my weird knowledge of remembering things, Aristocrats I actually watched for the first time 2 years before I met DK Wrestler because I was in grade 1 in our music teacher's class and she had played that movie. So that's the first time that I experienced that movie. Amazing as well. Robin Hood is another one where that's a property that has been done not only by Disney, because there's a bunch of different Robin Hood movies, but the Disney one is really cool and such an interesting story about taking from the rich and giving to the poor. I don't really think I've seen very many Robin Hood pops now that I think about it, but they are definitely out there. And then we have the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is again a timeless classic. I loved Winnie the Pooh growing up. My bedroom was painted as Winnie the Pooh with all the different characters before later on getting painted into a Toy Story theme for my walls in my bedroom. So yeah, Winnie the Pooh is awesome. I wish I had more Winnie the Pooh pops. I don't even think I have any besides the Funko soda, but that is a collection that I would like to start growing because Winnie the Pooh pops are really awesome, whether it comes to like the OG pops or even like the Christopher Robin pops, I think are really awesome as well. Pete's Dragon, I don't think that there's too many pops for Pete's Dragon, but the ones that are out there are really cool, like the dragon itself. Schoolhouse Rock, so excited for the new wave of pops to come, or the first wave, I guess you can say. These are so good. I loved watching Schoolhouse Rock and still do. It's an amazing educational programming, I guess. Just so classic. I feel like so many people can like recite I'm Just a Bill or Conjunction Junction. And then the Herbie series, I'm not too familiar with the Herbie series. Of course, I have seen Herbie Fully Loaded, but the 80s ones and like the 70s ones, I haven't really seen too much of. I know I have watched like bits and pieces as they'd been like played on like cable television, but I don't think I've actually watched through a whole Herbie movie besides Herbie Fully Loaded.
All right, so now we're moving over to the 1980s, which actually doesn't have that much. The Little Mermaid, I mean, The Little Mermaid has a ton of pops, of course. I'll get into that in a sec. But The Little Mermaid, The Black Cauldron, Tron, The Fox and the Hound, and a set that doesn't have Funko Pops, but would be really cool if it did, is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So Little Mermaid, of course, probably has to be, I would assume, like the most popular Disney movie of the 80s. I mean, it's just coming right in there because it's released, I believe, 1989. So it's just making the cut as an 80s movie. But I mean, what a classic movie. There's tons of Funko Pops. There was obviously the new live action movie that came out actually this year in 2023 for The Little Mermaid, and they made quite a bit of cool pops for this set. I can't exactly think of like a bunch of them off the top of my head. I mean, I could say Ariel a bunch of times, but like, God, there's just so many Ariels. The Black Cauldron is the movie I actually teased earlier, talking about what I watched for the first time the other night, because I remember people talking about like, oh, this is like one of the most underrated movies that Disney has made. And Black Cauldron, I'll be honest, is one of those movies that I feel like a very casual watcher would not really understand. I'll be honest, I barely can think of like exactly what happened in that movie because a lot happened in that movie, but it still was a pretty decent movie. I probably would have to watch that movie like a couple of times to really get the concept of what was really happening in the movie. But nonetheless, there is only one Funko Pop. I don't remember the names, but I believe it's like the main antagonist and the main protagonist in a 2-pack for San Diego Comic-Con, which was pretty cool. And I feel like at that point, especially after watching the movie, Funko should just keep it that way. I don't think it's necessary to make the other characters. Tron, I mean, for Funko Pops, we only got Tron Legacy, I believe. I don't think we got the original Tron, but I thought I'd mention it because it is one of those popular movies. The Fox and the Hound, I believe, did have pops. I don't remember. Disney's made, there's over 1,000 Disney pops, so it's hard to really keep track, but The Fox and the Hound, that was a pretty decent movie. And then Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a really awesome movie. And I remember watching, I think, the first sequel a couple of times, but obviously that very first Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie just stands the test of time. The 80s were a pretty decent time as terms to Disney, and not so much of like what you normally see with Disney movies, which is like a lot of musical-esque scenes.
Yeah, and going on with exactly what he said before I lose that thought is I feel like this time in the 80s is when you're getting kind of movies like that, like Honey, We Shrunk the Kids, more live action kind of family oriented movies. I feel like we were seeing pop up a lot as terms to like the late 80s and then obviously going into the 90s. But speaking about the 80s, the first one we have is The Little Mermaid. And yeah, there's a ton of Little Mermaid pops. Sebastian, probably, I feel like a lot of people's favorite character from The Little Mermaid. What a cool character. And there's again with Little Mermaid so many things that you can quote from The Little Mermaid, and just an amazing movie that I feel like everyone needs to watch at least once. Then The Black Cauldron, it took me a second. I actually had to do a Google search to remember what that was, and I have seen that one time. I remember being at a place where I used to go get my haircut and it was playing, so I watched it there. I'm definitely gonna have to rewatch it because I love kind of like the theme of that movie. It has like that kind of Dungeons and Dragons-esque kind of vibe to it, which is really awesome. Tron, I've never actually seen. I've never really been big into Tron or like the way that it looks, the cyber stuff, but I kind of do like the character designs, and I feel like they did a decent job with the Tron Legacy pops. The Fox and the Hound, I have seen the Fox and the Hound as well. I can't even remember what the pops look like for the Fox and the Hound though. And then we have the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of like trilogy of movies. I think there's 3 of them. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves or whatever, and
Yeah, I think that was
then Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Hey,
That one is hilarious. But Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, what a classic again. I love the opening scene where Rick Moranis has like all the things going on in the kitchen and like when the mail's outside and then it just like makes toast or something, if I'm remembering that correctly. But I love the concept of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where they're so small. And of course, there is the video game Grounded, which is basically that same thing. Unfortunately, there are no pops for that. And I didn't actually put that on my list, but I think it'd be really cool to see Funko do a way where you could have like the pops so small that they seem that small. Like even if you did like the bitty pops with like a 10-inch pop or something like that, so that you can get the concept of the movie itself in pop form.
All right, so now we're moving on to the decade we were born in, the 1990s. And this one's a little ridiculous because of the fact that like I had to really contain myself of not writing so much because there's so much I wrote here for the 1990s. So here's the list. And a lot of them include Funko Pops. Some of them don't have Funko Pops, but I thought I'd mention as movies I definitely seen as a kid. So first off, we got The Rocketeer, Beauty and the Beast, The Mighty Ducks series, Aladdin, Muppets Christmas Carol, Hocus Pocus, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Of course, we have to mention that. Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, and then movies that actually don't have Funko Pops, but I knew I had to mention Flubber, Tarzan, and then the live action Inspector Gadget that came out, I believe, in 1999. So Rocketeer, I've actually never seen before. I know that's probably going to be shocking to a lot of people, so I don't really have much of it. Beauty and the Beast, I mean, it's such a classic movie. There's so many pops. They just did even the like deluxe moments for that, which I know had a lot of flack because certain characters were missing. Aladdin, I mean, another classic movie, and Robin Williams playing as the genie, I believe. I mean, that's really awesome. Hocus Pocus, I actually seen for the first time, I think 2 years ago, and that's pretty decent. And I actually still have yet to see Hocus Pocus 2, which I guess is maybe something we'll talk about in the 2020 section. Nightmare Before Christmas, what a awesome movie. It is one of those movies that a lot of people are like, oh, do I watch it at Christmas? Do I watch it on Halloween? Do I watch it for both? But for me, it's a tradition that I actually watch it on American Thanksgiving in November because I feel it's right in the midpoint between Halloween and Christmas. And it also saves me time of trying to decide what am I going to watch for Halloween movies' sake and what am I going to watch for Christmas movies' sake without having to fill both slots for those movies when I can have more Halloween movies to watch and then watch more Christmas movies when it comes time to the Christmas holidays. But yeah, that movie is awesome. I mean, the whole story behind it, the animation style. I mean, Tim Burton, what a genius of a person. Hence why we wanted to acknowledge it and originally wanted to do a separate podcast on it. 30 years this year that Nightmare Before Christmas celebrates. Lion King, I will say this over and over again. I do feel, even though people love The Lion King, I think it's easily one of, if not the most overrated Disney movies of all time. To me, it's literally Shakespeare's Macbeth, but with lines. It's the exact same concept. It's about a kid and his dad who's the king, and then he's going to be the king, and then his dad gets killed by his uncle because his uncle is jealous, blah, blah. It's the same story. Pocahontas, I haven't really seen. Hunchback of Notre Dame, though, is a very underrated movie that I feel like not a lot of people talk about. The whole story behind it and the meaning, I think, is something that should resonate to a lot of people. Hercules, what an awesome movie. I mean, Hercules was already like I think, domain of a character, but they just made it into its own Disney movie, which I thought that was a pretty cool movie. Flubber is an awesome movie. God, I love Flubber. Robin Williams, what a genius. What a funny guy. Tarzan, really awesome movie. And then the live action Inspector Gadget. I mean, that was pretty cool. I remember having the toys growing up.
So moving into the 90s, a lot of these movies are super nostalgic, and I feel like the reason for that is because of all the merchandise that Disney was putting out in the 90s for these movies that me and DK would have grown up seeing in stores while we were kids. Starting with The Rocketeer, I don't think I've seen that movie either, but I have played the video game on the Super Nintendo, so that's basically the knowledge I have for The Rocketeer. But the pop is pretty dang sweet that we got for The Rocketeer. Beauty and the Beast, easily one of the best Disney movies. So good. It did feel a little short the last time I watched it, though. I watched it about a year ago, and I was like, why did it feel like I just started watching this and now it's already over? But with that being said, the characters in it are unbelievable. The story is really great as well. The Mighty Ducks, some great hockey movie with all three of them. They're all great. And then, of course, like the animated series as well. So good. And I'm so happy that we finally got some Mighty Ducks pops. I don't actually own them yet, but I don't think they're really that much on the secondary market. So I eventually one day will get all of those pops because they're really, really awesome. Aladdin is really great as well. Some of the songs in that movie are very recognizable to most people. The Muppets Christmas Carol, really awesome that we just got pops for this, which is just so cool. Super excited to get Muppets pops again. That's so great. Muppets Christmas Carol is an awesome movie. Not even my favorite Muppets Christmas movie, but it's pretty dang good. And when you have an ensemble of characters like the Muppets, it's awesome to be able to make movies like this. It's a story that's already been told before, but you're seeing the Muppets acted out essentially, and it's just so good. Hocus Pocus, really great movie as well that I actually hadn't seen until the second one came out. I was like, I better watch the first one and then watch the second one. And I liked them way more than I expected to. They were really great movies. The Nightmare Before Christmas, unbelievable as well. An amazing animated movie with the claymation, just so crazy, like DK said, with Tim Burton. And it is one of those movies, where do you watch it? I usually just pick one or the other, or sometimes I do kind of in the middle as well, or sometimes I just watch it in like spring, who knows. But again, a great movie. Then The Lion King, I wouldn't say it's the most overrated movie from Disney, but I guess it kind of is, though it is really, really great. And of course, Matthew Broderick, who voiced the like adult version of Simba, is also Inspector Gadget from the Inspector Gadget live action movie. And yeah, one of the greatest McDonald's toy sets of all time, if anything, from that movie, how you could piece together all the pieces and you get Matthew Broderick's Inspector Gadget. Unbelievable toy set and a pretty dang good movie as well. Pocahontas. I haven't watched Pocahontas in so long. That's definitely one that I have to go back and watch, but of course, that's a great movie. It's a lot different than we've seen with Disney, where they're kind of switching like nationalities with this movie, which is a great thing, and kind of start to see the progression of Disney when it comes into the 90s. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I agree with DK, super underrated film, so good. Quasimodo is just such a lovable character, even though he's not quite the best looking. Hercules, I loved Hercules so much when I was a little kid. I don't even know why, because I feel like I didn't even know what was happening in the story, but it's so good. Baby Hercules is hilarious. And then, of course, Hercules grows up to be who he is, and just such a cool movie with one of the best villains in film ever with Hades. Just so cool. Flubber, awesome movie as well. I also loved Flubber growing up. Robin Williams is amazing. I don't think anyone can deny that. And Flubber was a great movie. And then Tarzan, again, another one that I loved growing up. Tarzan was wicked. And we have seen some different versions of Tarzan. So cool. I love the characters from Tarzan as well.
All right, so now moving over to the 2000s. This is the same thing as the 1990s, where I feel I had to really try to contain myself when it comes to listing off different movies or TV series. Here's what I wrote, and there is a decent amount of both TV series and movies, whether they do have pops or not. So first off, Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, Princess and the Frog, Dinosaur, which I wanted to mention because that one's so randomly underrated, Meet the Robinsons, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and The Sweet Life on Deck, and then Wizards of Waverly Place. I'm sure that MD could think of more 2000 stuff, whether it's from those Disney Channel TV series or Disney movies in general that had came out at that time. I mean, Emperor's New Groove, once again, one of those movies that are kind of underrated. And as terms to Funko Pops, Funko's really kind of acknowledged that for the last couple of years, a Comic-Con exclusive pop for Emperor's New Groove, whether it is the Abundance of Kronks, which I don't mind because Kronk's actually my favorite character in that movie, or the different Yzmas. Lilo and Stitch, that's another like Funko favorite movie because there is a ton of Stitch. There's also a decent amount of Lilos, not quite as much as Stitch, but I also feel that Funko still needs to get the characters that haven't been made into pop form yet they've done it in like mystery mini form. Treasure Planet, we just got a pop for the first time, I believe, late last year for CCXP, so that was pretty cool. Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, I'll mention all those in a row because those are essentially singular characters for the new Disney 100 set, which is really cool. I mean, Hannah Montana, like, would have never really thought that Hannah Montana would be made into a pop. Lizzie McGuire, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's like a Pop and Buddy, right? Like they have Lizzie McGuire and then like the little cartoon version of her as like the buddy. So I really enjoy how they did that. Dinosaur. Oh man, Dinosaur is like that one random movie that I feel like so many people forget about. And the one thing that I do want to mention as terms to merchandising is the McDonald's hand puppets that you used to get. And I remember like getting the Happy Meals and wanting to get like, I think I got like all like 4 or 5 of them. I feel like it's one of those movies where like the animation style kind of still holds up to today, but it's not as bad as a lot of like movies that I feel like just aged so badly as terms to animation. Meet the Robinsons is a wicked movie with a really cool animation style that gives off this like a Nickelodeon type cartoon style, something that just doesn't seem like it's a Disney movie is what I really like about it. And then of course I gotta mention Sweet Life series, one of my favorite series, probably was actually, now as I think about it, my favorite Disney Channel series growing up, watching The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody every day coming home from school, and then especially The Sweet Life on Deck, which I felt like it's really hard to think like, is On Deck better than Zack and Cody, or is it the other way? I feel like it's pretty close to equal because they all have their moments. And something I do have to mention because it's right at the top of my head, and if I don't mention this, then I'm going to forget about it, is how we're almost a month away from when Cody Martin books that restaurant in Italy and they tell him his reservation is like November something 2023. That is absolutely insane how we're actually close to that. And I hope that Cole Sprouse actually goes to Italy on that day and goes into an Italian restaurant. And then Wizards of Waverly Place, what an awesome show also. And that's actually a series I did not write down as terms to Funko Pops, but would be a really awesome set, not just to take one character and do it for the Disney 100 set. Let's wait a little bit, do a whole wave, do the Russos, all of them, especially Max, to the max. That's an untapped potential wave of Pops right there.
Yeah, I mean, the 2000s, of course, is right in our wheelhouse, and there's so many. Starting off with my favorite Disney movie of all time, The Emperor's New Groove. So many things I could say about it, but let's talk about the Funko Pops. Amazing. It's amazing how many Funko Pops we have at this point now. When the set first came out, we got Cusco, we got the like llama or alpaca version of Cusco, we got Yzma and Kronk and Pacha, and I believe that's all we got. I think there was a chase for Yzma, but that was it. And now there's a ton of different ones. We have Yzma and Kronk like on the throne. We have the lab coats versions of Yzma and Kronk. There's so many different Kronks, which is so awesome. And I own just about all of them. I'm not really missing much, which is great because, like I said, one of my favorite, if not my favorite Disney movie, and the pops are so good. They all look so funny, which is amazing. Lilo and Stitch, which is another one of my favorite Disney movies. I remember as a young child having dreams of purchasing Lilo and Stitch on VHS. And then now, of course, I own it on DVD. I own it on VHS. And the pops are a little much. There's way too many Stitch pops. We need to see some of the other characters. I mean, I'm so sick of seeing Stitch pops. I don't think there's much more you can do for Lilo. So we need to start seeing some of the other characters in pop form. Treasure Planet, an underrated movie for sure. Great movie. I watched it pretty recently, sometime this year, probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And yeah, a great movie. And the one pop that we do have for Treasure Planet so far is really good. I think that Funko should definitely make more because the character designs in this movie are just so obscure and really, really cool. So I would love to see more. Lizzie McGuire, the pop that we've seen for Lizzie McGuire is perfect. I don't think we need anything else. It would be cool to see her two friends in pop form, but I don't really think that's needed. The pop that we got with the little animated version of her as well is just so ingenious and just a perfect pop, honestly. That's So Raven, and I feel like there's a lot of different That's So Raven pops that we could see. We could see like Raven in like cow form when she like turns into a cow. I think that that would be hilarious. Obviously Corey and the rest of the family, as well as Raven's friends. I feel like we should see some of these pops because they probably would sell. And speaking of pops that would sell, we need a Hannah Montana lineup because I think the one pop is not good enough. I would love to see all the other characters. I would like to see maybe like a pop town of the cheese jerky hut. I think that that would be hilarious. Cheese jerky. I think that that would be hilarious. And hopefully we do see more. The Princess and the Frog, there's a decent amount of pops for the Princess and the Frog. And I feel like those pops are pretty underrated because they look really good. Dinosaur, yeah, the first thing that I thought about was that McDonald's set of toys. I feel like everyone kind of has some nostalgic feel for those hand puppets, and you had to have at least owned one at some point if you grew up in the 2000s or had kids. Meet the Robinsons, yeah, I think that a point that DK brought up, which is something that I always think about, is that Meet the Robinsons just does not feel like a Disney movie. I don't know what it is, but I always forget that it's a Disney movie. I always feel like it feels like it's a DreamWorks movie when it comes to the animation style. Like it feels like the Minions or like just any other DreamWorks movie like that. It's just the same kind of animation, but the story is incredible. So the story really is Disney, and that's where it kind of brings you back like, oh yeah, this definitely is a Disney movie because the storytelling in it is just so great. The Sweet Life series, and yeah, definitely one of my favorites as well. Unbelievable. And it is tough to say, like, was the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody or was Sweet Life on Deck better? I don't really know because sometimes I feel like, no, the original was better. It's the original. But then sometimes I'm like, no, Sweet Life on Deck was just so well done that that one's better. I kind of just put them all together, call it one series. It's just sweet. And then we have Wizards of Waverly Place, another great series that is definitely deserving of pops. I mean, there's a lot that you could do with them. That was, again, a great series. If there's any other things that I can add, the first thing, of course, is Kim Possible. I mean, unbelievable. I loved Kim Possible so much, and I don't know why we don't have pops for Kim Possible. There's so much that you can do, whether it comes to villains or different versions of Kim Possible or Ron Stoppable. So much that can be done. I really, really hope we do get some of those pops.
All right, so moving on to the 2010s, there wasn't really much that I listed down because at this point now we're reaching the 2010s. Like, it's very hard to mention it as like the best of Disney realistically, because a lot of what we just talked about is what most people would think of. But this is some things that maybe people would put into consideration. So fortunately, I had to write this down, but people could mention it as one of today's best Disney movies is Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, and Moana. I think those could be some contenders for best of Disney for the 2010. So Frozen, I mean, yeah, like I mentioned, like unfortunately I have to mention Frozen because it literally is one of the like more popular Disney franchises of today's age. I think they're even in works of making a third movie now after the success of the two movies that they already did within the 2010s. So Frozen, there's a ton of pops for that. I mean, there were so many Olafs like they did with like Grogu nowadays and Groot. Big Hero 6 was a really good movie. I enjoyed that. Quite a bit of Baymax pops, and then some of the other characters that they did. Zootopia was a really cool movie, especially, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're making a number 2, which is pretty cool. I enjoyed the first one. I think I still do have it in my collection, is the Flash Funko Pop, which if you guys don't remember, that is the sloth in the movie that I feel just kind of almost made for the movie, but even though it was an awesome storyline. And then Moana is definitely like one of those movies that like, yeah, you can definitely tell it's Disney because of course throughout pretty much the movie it's like a huge musical. I mean, The Rock is in the movie, so like you can't go wrong with an animated movie that has The Rock. And I feel like the character of Maui was like so perfect for The Rock, especially the whole setting because it's based in Hawaii. Like Rock pretty much kind of lived that lifestyle in a way and grew up in that.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few really great movies here. Frozen, I think DK's a hater. The Frozen movies are pretty good. I don't know if I've actually seen the second one now that I think about it, but I've seen the first one a couple times. And yeah, that's got to be like, that's like a mega horse, like for Disney, like so much sales they must have done in merchandise for Frozen. Just unbelievable. You cannot not bring it up when you're talking about a Disney kind of podcast. Big Hero 6 was a great movie as well. I actually watched that movie on my way home from Cuba on the airplane. It was the movie that was being played, and I really, really enjoyed it. That's a great movie that I'm going to have to watch again very soon. Zootopia, another movie that is really awesome. Judy Hopps, I believe, is the main character's name. She's a wicked character. I really love that movie. Definitely going to watch the second one when it comes out. And then Moana, one of my favorite of the more modern Disney movies. That was such a great movie. I loved it so much. And like DK said, with the characters and The Rock being in it, just so good. And the songs in it are just beautiful as well. So before we get out of the 2010s, I wanted to talk about this show, which we're definitely forgetting, which is an amazing Disney show, a fan favorite for most people. Phineas and Ferb, how can you not talk about it? I mean, pops for Phineas and Ferb would be just unreal. Of course, you could have a platypus and then put a hat on him, and then it's Perry the Platypus, Dr. Doofenshmirtz. And I think that there's actually, they got rebooted for like 2 or 3 more seasons, which is just amazing. I can't wait to see new episodes of Phineas and Ferb. That's going to be really, really cool. And if they make pops for when the new show comes out, I will definitely be buying them because how could you not?
So, as terms to the 2020s, once again, this is really difficult because how many films could you say out of the 2020s are considered the best of Disney? And you can put them up there with like what we talked about. So, there's only, I believe, 3 films I listed as terms to the 2020s, especially because 2020s is so new. First one being Hamilton because it's like Disney Plus, but I don't know if necessarily it's considered like Disney. Raya and the Last Dragon that I know came out during the pandemic. And then one that I feel like is the highlight of the 2020s because everyone's been talking about it, and especially Funko still making products for it. It's Encanto. Out of all those, like Hamilton, I still have not seen, which I know you give me a lot of flack for that, but hey, you still have not seen Avengers Endgame, so we're kind of even there. Raya and the Last Dragon, I know they made a decent amount of pops. They didn't really sell all that well. I seen the movie, I think, once or twice, probably just once. And then Encanto, I mean, yeah, I don't blame people for liking Encanto because especially we don't talk about Bruno. What a catchy song and a pretty decent story involved with Encanto also.
All right, so Hamilton, yeah, I wouldn't even consider that Disney, but it's amazing. If you haven't watched it, I definitely suggest it. And the pops are pretty cool for that as well. I do own like 1 or 2 of the Hamilton pops. Raya and the Last Dragon, I thought was a pretty decent movie, but it did take me like 3 times to get through it. I'd either like fall asleep or just like go do something else while I was watching it. So maybe not the best movie, but it was pretty good. Encanto was brilliant as well. It's so interesting to see a movie where it kind of just takes place all in one setting. Like it's all kind of just at the house besides one scene that I'm not going to talk about, but it's all basically just in the house, which is just crazy. And these songs in it are just so catchy and so good. And I'm going to have to rewatch that very soon, mostly because of the songs. They're just amazing.
All right, so I guess this is the time where we discuss about what pops we want to see as turns to the Disney lineup. Once again, strictly just Disney. So I don't know what you wrote on your list. So hopefully there's no Pixar or Marvel or Star Wars. Brand new Luke Skywalker. No, I had wrote 5. I think you may have written 5. So it was either just a singular pop or just a huge set overall, because there are so many Disney movies and TV series that haven't gotten the Funko treatment yet that I think should. First one I'm going to mention, a Herbie the Love Bug pop rides. I think that would be absolutely amazing. And the thing that would be very interesting about this pop is that it would be like the first, if I'm not mistaken, pop rides of just the vehicle and there's no human, because technically for the most part Herbie can drive itself, so it doesn't need a human character. Although when you talk about like fully loaded, it's like, all right, add the Lindsay Lohan pop to it, but like Herbie you can just do by itself. And even if it's a rides, or now as I think about it, what if you did like the pop movie posters and then you can just do bam like that?
Or I wouldn't be surprised if they went the Cars route and just gave us the damn sideways boxes. Hopefully they don't do that though. That would really be not great. But I do agree. It'd be cool to see a Herbie pop.
Next pop I wrote down is for the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that is Claude Frollo. That is the antagonist of the movie, and it's a bit of a shame that they never made that pop. They made quite a bit of Quasimodos. They did Esmeralda. I think that was about it. It was only Quasimodo, like the 3 different versions, and then Esmeralda. They never did the main antagonist, especially you could have done a pop town. Why wasn't there a pop town of the like church or the cathedral or whatever the proper name for it is? Like that would have been absolutely awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be a really great one as well. I'm surprised we haven't seen it because we got at least 2 or 3 Quasimodos at this point now.
The third one I wrote down is Professor Philip Brainard, which is Robin Williams' character in Flubber. I think that would be awesome. MD's making a weird face at me, so I feel like he may have put that on his list too. And I think the logical route with this is obviously him with Flubber in his hand, kind of a poppin' buddy, but not obviously like the buddy beside it. It would have to be sitting in his hand.
So I also have this on my list. The way that I see it being done is you have Philip Brainard and he's holding Flubber in his hand as a singular pop. And then you have a standalone Flubber pop where he's wearing like the sunglasses or like even just like the normal glasses. I think that that'd be amazing as its own pop. And then if you're going to make those 2 pops, you got to have a singular pop of Weebo. I feel like that would be really great as well. Weebo is an interesting character and like a main part of the story too. So I feel like it'd be really great to just have 3 pops in this set, and then you get kind of all that you need out of the Flubber movie in pop form.
And then the last 2 I hear are both sets. The first one is Meet the Robinsons. I think that would be so wicked to do as Funko Pops. There's so many interesting looking characters. Obviously, you have the main characters whose names I can't really remember for some reason, but obviously, like you have the blonde-haired nerd kid and the black-haired kid, which I believe was one of the Robinsons, hence Meet the Robinsons. And then you can have characters like the grandpa. I think that'd be hilarious to do in a Funko Pop. And I believe there was like twins in the movie, and then you can even have like that one random T-Rex as a part of the set that just runs around. And then you could do a pop town with the house, because the house is really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen, let's say, like 2011 era, like Meet the Robinsons pops. It's amazing to me that we haven't seen those. It feels like just a set that is one of those like sleeper sets that you would have seen way back in the day when Funko Pops were basically first coming out.
And then the last set of pops before MD mentions his list of what he wants to see is got to be, I've mentioned it so many times, the Sweet Life series pops, like Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, Sweet Life on Deck. There's so much untapped potential. I mean, obviously the twins, you got Maddie, London Tipton, Mr. Mosby, Esteban. And I've mentioned so many times, you make that pop, you got to add his full freaking name on the box. Esteban, Julio, Ricardo, Rodriguez, Ramirez. I mixed some. There's so many names in Esteban's name that like I don't remember how many there is and what the exact order is of those names. And yeah, there's just so many, and especially on deck. Like I wouldn't say go as far as do as a ride of the boat, but there's obviously the characters like Bailey Pickett, and then you have Woody, and it's just like There's so many awesome characters in both of the series that it's once again one of those sets that I feel like needs quite a bit of Funko Pops, even though Funko has been doing a lot of sets that have too many pops, hence why you see so many shelf sitter pops nowadays.
Yeah, of course, this is a dream that me and DK have both been having, to get a large set of Sweet Life Pops. I think that it is needed. I feel like so many people would want to get them. And I don't think it would be wanting to just get Zach and Cody. I think it would be some of those other characters, like DK had said, with Esteban or even Mr. Mosby. I think that those would be very, very good. And I feel like if we're going to get anything, yeah, maybe not the ship itself as a Pop Rides, but definitely a Pop Towns with the Tipton. I mean, that just makes so much sense. All right, so starting off with the first pop that I written down, this could definitely be a set of pops because this movie had quite a bit of really interesting characters, but I feel like you only really need one pop for this, and that would be Chicken Little. I feel like Chicken Little would be great. You could either have him in like just like his normal clothes, or you could have him where he's like got the baseball helmet on, he's got the baseball bat. I think that that would be amazing, and I'm surprised that we haven't seen a Chicken Little pop.
And then you can even do a chase figure that's called Rye the Pop Guy.
Yeah, definitely. That would be funny. But yeah, like I said, this could easily be a whole wave of pops because there are some really, really obscure characters, but just a Chicken Little would be great. And then the next pop that I have is actually a 2-pack, and this is something that I've talked about on the channel previously, but this is like one of the ones where it's like, how has this not been done? That's for Lilo and Stitch, and that is a 2-pack of Jumba and Bleakley. How has this not been done? We just had a bunch of cons that had passed this year. How have we not seen this? We're kind of sick of seeing Stitches. I think from this date now, I'm going to count how many times we see a new Stitch pop until we get Jumba and Pleakley. And then when we do, we'll talk about it on the channel, how many Stitch pops that was, because it's going to be too many. I can tell you that. Jumba and Pleakley are awesome characters. There's a million more characters in Lilo and Stitch that could also have pops, but Funko just keeps putting out Stitches. I understand in a business aspect, they're going to sell well because it's Stitch, but the actual hardcore fans of Lilo and Stitch, I know, definitely want to see some of these other characters in pop form.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mentioned earlier. Like, stop it with the Stitch pops. They're kind of on the right path. Like, didn't we get, was a Reuben earlier this year for Toy Fair or whatever, Funko Fair? I don't know what they're calling it nowadays. So yeah, let's get on that path of non-Stitch pops.
And then the next pop that I have is actually a set of pops, because I feel like it would have to be a set, and this could be a pretty big set, but I feel like they could probably narrow it down to about 5 pops. And that is for James and the Giant Peach. I loved this movie growing up so much. Of course, you have like the live action in the beginning of the movie, and then when he goes into the Peach, that's when it becomes the like claymation animation. This set would just simply contain James, Miss Spider, Mr. Centipede, Mr. Grasshopper, and Mrs. Ladybug. I think that this would be so cool, and the way I could see these pops kind of looking like the pops that we've seen for Don't Starve, kind of like that weird kind of style. They wouldn't quite be exactly what you think when it comes to a Funko Pop, just because the way that the animation is with that movie.
It's funny enough, I was actually thinking about watching James and the Giant Peach on Disney Plus the other night, and now I feel like maybe in the next couple of days, hopefully I don't forget, I may watch James and the Giant Peach again, because yeah, that's an awesome movie, and I feel like you're gonna have to incorporate the Peach as its own pop somehow.
And then the last set of pops that I have here, this has had 3 or 4 movies, I believe, and there could be a ton of different pops, but that is for the series of movies known as Halloween Town. I don't know why we don't have pops, because I feel like so many people talk about it, especially at this time of the year where Halloween's right around the corner, and it's their go-to Halloween movie for the most part is Halloween Town, Return of whatever, Halloween Town 3, whatever that one's called. They're all amazing. Halloween Town High, I believe, is like the 4th movie, or maybe the 3rd movie. I don't remember exactly, but the list of pops that I have for this, like, let's say first wave, Marnie, of course, the main character, Aggie, Sophie, Dylan, Benny the skeleton, like cab driver, I think could be awesome, even if it was a Pop Rides. It doesn't have to be, but it should be a Pop Rides. Calabar with the chase, so you can have his like persona that you see him as like a human, but then also see him with the kind of like, I guess, like Scarecrow-esque type deal, like from Batman. It's kind of that kind of look that he had. And then also one that I threw in here is Luke as well, with the chase, where you can have his human form as well as the form that he was kind of turned into throughout the movie.
And this is exactly why I mentioned about not knowing about when to watch Nightmare Before Christmas, because imagine I watched Nightmare Before Christmas during Halloween and I didn't have time to watch Halloween Town. God, that's such an amazing series of movies. Halloween Town, I believe then it's Halloween Town Calabar's Revenge. That's the second one. Halloween Town High, I believe, is the third one, and then it's Return to Halloween Town is the fourth one, if I'm not mistaken. But that would be some pretty banger pops.
Where are the Halloween Town pops? These are going to sell very, very well, I feel, if Funko were to make them, because, like I said, so many people just talk about Halloween Town when it comes to this time of the year.
Anyways, guys, that is going to be the end of this edition of a Funko Podcast. And if you enjoyed our Best of Disney version of a Funko Podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your favorite Disney movies and what pops you want to see next. But thank you for listening to this podcast, and we hope to see you guys on another one. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Peace in, peace out.